let's go back to October 3rd, 1979. Tell me what your day was like, and then let's lead into what happened to you. So tell me what your day was like.
Sure. I was in elementary school, so we had half days on Wednesdays. So I was not at my house at the time of the tornado. I was at my friend's house, the Spataforas, and my mom was home, and it was like a normal play date. We just hung out with the Spataforas, Andrea and Christine, and we noticed something was different when the lightning and the thunder struck at the same time. So we were young, scared us a little, so we went upstairs where we felt it would be safe. And everything just started to get louder. I don't know how else to describe it. The rain became more intense. The thunder and lightning were on top of each other. And then we lost power. And as we lost power, we tried to open the bedroom door to get out, because we had shut the bedroom door. We couldn't open the door. So we immediately knew that something was wrong. But of course, being 10 years old, I had no idea. So then we went to the windows. You could see stuff flying around out the windows. And one of the bricks came off of the chimney, came through the window, and it changed the pressure in the house, which caused the house or the upper level of the house to explode. And there's a time where I can remember flying, I don't know what other word to use, flying through the air because I could feel the debris hitting me. At some point, I ended up with a concussion, dislocated shoulder, dislocated hip. And we landed gently, softly like a feather. It was very interesting. I remember opening my eyes in the middle of it because I thought it was a dream. I was trying to wake up from a nightmare. When everything started to settle, when the rain started to clear and the dust started to clear, is when you could see the damage. But being 10 years old, you didn't understand what was happening. I could see my house from the middle of the lawn, because we were in the middle of the lawn at this point. We were thrown 300 feet from the actual house. All that was left of the Spataforas house was the lower level of a raised ranch. And I could see my house. The roof was off of my house. And there were trees everywhere, just down, because where my house was, I had a lot of trees. We had over 40 trees in our backyard, a lot of oak trees. And I couldn't make heads or tail of much. And when we finally were able to actually see things were clear, we crawled into Mrs. Cosgrove's car, because she had gone to get the kids at the bus stop who were getting off the bus for Sage Park. She had gone to collect her kids. So the three of us climbed into her car. And I was in just a t-shirt and jeans because I was inside, I was freezing. And one of the girls gave me a sweatshirt to put on, but I couldn't put it on because I couldn't move my arm. And we were in the car, couldn't tell you how long, it felt like forever. And we were just waiting. And we kind of realized we're alive. We kind of started to realize that something big had happened. We turned around, we looked at the house. We noticed the house was destroyed. It was what we thought it was. And we waited until Mrs. Cosgrove said I could get out of the car to go down to see my mom. At that point, I must have reset my hip or did something where I could walk. So I was able to walk down to my house. And I can vividly still hear my mother screaming for my brother who had gotten off of the Sage Park bus. But he did not. He ended up getting detention. And he did not get off the bus. So my mother is looking avidly for my brother. She's looking everywhere for my brother. She can't find him. My mother, at that point, was in a complete panic. And she didn't have her wits about her. She was collecting people that had been tossed from their houses and putting them in our basement. If I remember correctly, we had about 5 or 6 people in our basement of our home, sitting on our furniture, waiting for, obviously, ambulance and care to come. I was able to get down to the house and walked in the house, and I began to walk up the stairs. 10 years old, your roof's over your head, you're safe. I walk up the stairs and there's no roof. No roof. The most amazing part that I remember from walking in the house was all our crosses, our religious crosses, were still on the wall. The roof was gone, but the religious crosses remained on the walls. I walked into my bedroom. All my religious statues were fine. All my doll collection completely destroyed. It was quite fascinating at 10 years old to see all this and take it all in, that your room is now destroyed, your safety is now gone. I proceeded to go downstairs, back outside, to help my mom look for my brother, but she didn't want me anywhere near anybody, so she made me sit in a car. I have no idea whose car I sat in, but she had me sit in a car where she knew she could see me and where she knew I was safe. Again, a timeline, couldn't tell you how long I was in that car before they allowed emergency vehicles over the two bridges, because the tornado came up from the river down at Welch Park and then crossed over the bridge that heads into Windsor Locks, the Route 20 bridge. So it was a while before rescue services could show up. I can remember the tornado being very loud. People say it sounds like a train. It was more like a real heavy roar. You know, a train is pretty distinct, where this was like nothing else I've ever heard.
All right, so let's go back, and if you haven't figured out, if I'm not reacting verbally, it's just because I'm not on camera and I don't want them to get my voice. It's not that I'm not wowed by your story. Let's go back to when you're in the bedroom upstairs with two other Spatafora girls. Okay, so you're up there. Were you looking out the window? Were you trying to say like, oh, it's not a big deal? Or were you like, oh my gosh, I'm scared? Like do you remember what was kind of going through your mind before the brick came in and before all of that?
I've never been afraid of thunderstorms, but I remember being scared. I remember being petrified because the lightning and the thunder hit around Meakin Drive, which is, you can see Meakin Drive from the Spatafora's house. So we knew it hit close. So we ran upstairs because we were petrified. Yes, we were very scared. Trying to get downstairs to open the door, trying to open the door to get downstairs, yeah, that's when we really, all three of us, even Christine, who was 16 at the time, I was 10, became alarmed. And she knew something was really wrong.
Where was the mother home? Was their mother home?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So you described being thrown, and you have you have a memory of being thrown, or you just have a memory of landing. Maybe elaborate, if you can, a little bit about that.
Well, I don't have an exact memory of being thrown, but I do remember the debris hitting me. I do remember, this arm was the arm that was dislocated, it's my left. I remember using my right to be able to shield the debris from hitting me. So in my greatest estimation, I was thrown. I never felt picked up. I never felt placed. It's very, very different. It's kind of hard to describe because there was no launch, there was no impact.
If you remember, when you opened your eyes, obviously you're in shock. You don't even know kind of getting your bearings. But did you wonder where your friends were? Where were they in relation to you? I guess as well.
When I opened my eyes, it was between the house and landing 300 feet from the house. I have no idea. At that point, you couldn't see anything. It was all just, it was like white noise on a TV. It was just, you couldn't see anything. It wasn't until everything started to clear, that we were able to locate each other, and we were nowhere near each other when we landed, when we were placed sporadically through the front lawn. We had no idea where the other one was, and obviously we were able to get into the Cosgroves car, because Christine, I don't remember seeing her crawl, but she had a broken leg, so she had to make her way to the car, and I mean, Andrea was with me, but we were all in shock. I could barely remember.
Did you, because you were in shock, did you feel pain at all in your body?
There was no pain. There was no pain. It was all fear. It was all fear, because you lost your safety of your home. I couldn't place anything, because I think the hardest thing for me was when I looked at my house, I imagined my family dead. Because I survived, but I couldn't fathom that they did. And for whatever reason, at 10 years old, I didn't think that my parents were, I figured my parents were home not working. Most parents are working. My mother was actually a stay-at-home mom. Tom was a police officer in Bloomfield. He was working. And my sister was down at the Pequannock school. So, but in my mind, it basically told me my family was dead. And it was a scary, even more amplified scary moment until I got to my mom and she told me where everybody was.
When you got in the Cosgroves car, were you just sitting there? Was she trying to drive away from, or was she just trying to kind of get her bearings as well? What was going on in the car, if you remember?
The car, we just sat in the car. I think we were all in shock, obviously. She didn't move. She didn't try to drive away. She just parked in front of the Spatafora's house and waited. After I got out of the car, I obviously didn't look back. I was making my way down to my house, so I'm not sure if she tried to travel with her car or if she waited for Mrs. Spatafora, who I believe, if I remember correctly, went up to get her boys from the bus stop up at Meakin.
So you get home, and you're eventually sitting in another car so that your mother can watch you. And what do you remember happening after that? Did you go to the hospital? Tell me what happened after things started to really happen with the emergency responders.
Yeah. The memories I have are very broken and sporadic, but I distinctly remember. I don't know if I got into a van, a car, an ambulance. It's unclear, but I remember a firefighter carrying me into the Pequannock fire station and placing me on a pool table. And he gently said to me, "Somebody upstairs was watching out for you," which was really touching for me because I was raised with faith. So after that, it's a blur. Maybe because I was able to start to decompress because I was in a safer place and everything was intact. No houses were destroyed. I ended up in the hospital, and this was a traumatic thing for me because my birthday was 2 days prior the tornado. So I had just turned 10 and I had my birthday clothes on. And unfortunately, I'll never forget it, was my jeans and a white and pink striped shirt. And they had to cut it off of me. So I was very, very, very upset about that. I remember them, okay, so I have stitches under my arm. So they placed my arm, they secured it, and they had sewn up some stitches or a cut that I had under my arm, put my arm in a sling. The hardest part was they had to wash my eyes. So if you're familiar with how you wash eyes, they have plastic eye pieces that hold your eyes open. So I had to have my face over a sink and those in my eyes for at least an hour, if not more, to clean my eyes out because I had glass, insulation, sand, dirt, everything. And I remember I had 2 patches over my eyes and I couldn't see. And it was at least a day or 2 that I couldn't see. And then I remember, I don't think my parents were with me in the hospital. I don't recall anyone with me. What I do recall after my eyes being washed, I remember hearing my grandparents' voices. And that's how I knew that where I was going. My grandparents were picking me up. And I remember they had me sit in the front seat between the two of them. So I guess so they could watch me. I don't know. I had eye patches on my eyes. Couldn't see anything. And that was the last thing I remember of that day.
Tell me if you know what was it your brother that had the detention? What has he ever talked about what he was feeling about that day? Has he ever shared that with you?
No. I think not being home was, he didn't understand what we had gone through. My mother actually, there was only one working phone. I don't know how that happened. Our neighbor next door, the house did not get touched. And that's how my mom found out about my brother getting detention, because she called the school looking for him. Oh yeah, he's here. So.
All right, so let's go forward to tornado has passed. You are now at your grandparents'. What do you remember about the first time you went back to your neighborhood? Tell me what you're feeling, but tell me what you saw the first time you went back.
I can't recall the first time I went back, but I can recall when we, as the children, were allowed to go back. We had gotten a FEMA trailer. And when the FEMA trailer was parked in the front lawn, we were able to go back into the neighborhood. It looked like a bomb went off. I think the thing I remember the most was the tree cover was gone. Because it had taken all the trees out of the gully, because it had come up from River Road into the gully and up Hollowbrook and hopped out on Settler Circle, which is Pioneer Drive where I lived. No trees. So it was wide open. So I just remember the sun was shining and my house was being taken apart. They left the framing because the framing was still good. But I remember they took all the shake off, the doors off, the windows out. It was kind of creepy, kind of eerie.
What was life like living in the trailer? Do you remember having memories of that it was difficult, or it was fine, or you felt safe or not safe, or?
For me, it was difficult. When it rained, you could hear the pitter-patter of the rain on the metal roof, which it just absolutely frightened me. It was difficult because the family didn't understand what I had gone through. So I would wake up with night terrors, and I would wake up screaming. So it would cause a lot of stress in the house because no one could console me. It was close quarters because obviously we go from a house to a trailer. But everybody did manage. But I didn't like living in the trailer. I spent most of my time outside walking around the yard and watching the men work and walking around the neighborhood because I didn't like the trailer. It was too scary for me.
Interesting. So when you walked around the neighborhood, you're a child, so your perspective is going to be different than an adult who, when people are pitching in to help. But what was your feeling walking around the neighborhood? Were you sad walking and seeing everything the way it was, or were you just trying to get to a new normal and do the things that you would normally do?
A little bit of both. I used to spend a lot of time down in the gully, playing in the water and playing in the rocks. And when the tornado came through, it took all the trees out. So it changed the dynamics of the gully. So I would go down there and I would just look around and see things and move sticks around and move trees around. And it was more of an exploring, trying to, yes, create a new normal of a place I used to play. The neighborhood, everybody was cleaning up. So everybody was talking, everybody was spending time except for the neighbors across the street that didn't actually come back. So it was eerie on that side because all you saw was foundation because they lost their entire house. So finding a new normal was kind of really what my game plan was. And I was fascinated by what had happened. Here we have an active nature that destroyed my neighborhood, which I once felt safe in. It does change your perspective of safety. That's definitely for sure.
Did you, what was it like to go back to school? Do you remember how long you were out of school?
No, I don't remember how long we were out. We got bused. I was in 5th grade, so we got bused to Roger Wolcott. And it was quite a dynamic difference coming from Pequannock, which is kind of segregated from the rest of the town, because we just, even segregated from Windsor Center, just because we're so far away. 20 minutes is a lot for a kid. So we were in Roger Wolcott. It was not a good experience for me. I struggled until they opened Pequannock School again. A lot of fear. I think the tornado really rocked my safety perspective. And then, of course, new school, being bused, because I used to walk. So it was a whole new perspective, and it was different.
Do you think that some of the people that we've interviewed, the hardest thing for them, and I'd like to hear if you felt this way as a child, but some people kind of moved on, or bounced back quicker. Mm-hmm. Did you kind of feel that people didn't really understand how traumatized you were? I mean, did you do any counseling, or was it just kind of like you just had to get back to your life? I mean, is that what people expected of you? Just get back to your life and go along?
I think the ignorant people absolutely expected you to get back on track, get back into your life, get going. I spent many months in counseling, and actually many years in counseling, trying to just get over the fear of the thunderstorms. I had fear of thunderstorms up until I was about 36. So it took me a long time, and then I just actually moved past the hospital trauma within the past year. So it's been in stages. The safety thing was the longest. And I don't think I really felt safe until I was actually in high school, because Pequannock School was still very close to the epicenter, still walking to school every day. So it wasn't until I was bused far enough away from the area that I felt safe. But again, your relative safety always gets checked when there's a thunderstorm or a tornado warning.
Have you been in any kind of extreme weather since that time? Besides just the natural fear that you would have you been in a hurricane or like or a tornado warning? I mean, since that time when you were a child?
Yeah, there's been a couple times here. We was in Gloria, which I think was a year later or a couple of years later. That I remember hunkering down in the basement with my mother, who was absolutely petrified. And me being brazen, I ran out in the middle of the storm when it was the eye, just to check it out to see if we were still safe, if we had lost our neighborhood. Interesting fact. Several years later, I was about 30. I was involved in a microburst. I was down in New Britain, and I was in a car where a microburst actually pushed the car down. So, you're driving along and it pushes at the air. I just remember screaming. Poor people in the car. But yeah, and then the tornado warning spooked me for a while. I don't get as nervous, but I definitely watch the radar. I've definitely become a radar watcher when the weather gets bad.
We've heard that several times. People, looking or judging the wind and how fast the clouds are moving. Mm-hmm. We just interviewed somebody who he says when there's a bad storm, he looks at the clouds right away to see if they're moving fast, because that was one of his memories, was how fast they were moving that day. Mm-hmm. So tell me, do you feel that your neighborhood was changed after the tornado? Obviously they were changed, but tell me if you remember maybe how it changed. Were you closer? Did everybody get back to normal after they were all back in their house? What do you kind of remember maybe that was different?
I think for the first year, while we were all in trailers, we were close. We would offer help and be assistance to the neighbors. The settler circle, which was completely demolished except for one house, unfortunately Mrs. Dombrowski had lost her life, and she was on settler circle. And I can't think of the people who lived across the street. They never moved back in. So there were some dynamics to the neighborhood that did change it, but all in all, we did try to help each other out in that first year. And as the trailers began to leave, I think that's when the neighborhood really started to begin to settle in and become more of a neighborhood again, because you're slowly taking the reminders of the tornado away, each trailer as they left. I remember watching my trailer drive away. I was like, see ya.
For years after, did you feel a bond with the people that had, in your neighborhood, but that had gone through that, and did you keep in touch with them even after maybe high school, with the people that you went through this experience with?
Yeah, the Spataforas, mostly Andrea, because we were the same age, but 2 years difference. And again, most people didn't understand what we went through. So they didn't have the ability to identify with our reconstructing of our lives and the fears. And so everybody else was just there, being supportive, but mostly Andrea is the one person I stayed in close contact with.
Just a few more questions, I think. You really touched on this already, but I think I just want to ask it as its own question. How do you think the experience changed you? As you were young at the time, 10 years old, your formative years, as they say. So how do you think this experience changed you?
It changed me in multiple ways. I mean, if we're going to look at it from the perspective of a negative, fear. It placed a strong, deep safety fear. It humbled me at 10 even, that I know that no matter what, you're not safe when it comes to weather. You have to find a means to be safe. And on the positive side, it grew my faith in God, because I'd already had the faith to start with, and then I lived through being thrown almost, or not more than 300 feet from a house in an F5 and lived. I mean, it's very surreal.
Oh, definitely. All right, I'm just looking at my notes here. Is there anything, I think I hit all my points here. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want people to know? Is there anything we didn't touch on about that experience that maybe somebody doesn't know, or that we didn't touch on today? Anything you can think of?
My mother's perspective, I remember speaking to my mom about it, and she had gathered the people and brought them into the house. She told me stories of grabbing teenagers from telephone poles, and we had wood guardrails around the gully, and just collecting the kids because they had gotten off the bus and started walking home or started running home. So I distinctly remember my mother just telling me about peeling kids off of telephone poles, because they wouldn't let go because they were so scared.
Wow. When TJ and John were in here telling their story, they were both saying how they were pinned by the wind against those barriers, those wooden barriers. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I can't even imagine what it was like to be walking home in that. I was in a house.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think I've hit all of my questions here. Anything else that we didn't touch on?
No, I mean, it's. I think I covered everything. It was just such an amazing day. And it was in case nobody told you this, it started out about 50-something degrees. When everything was said and done, by 3:30, the sun was out and it was 70. In case somebody didn't tell you that part, because I remember sitting in the car and it was a beautiful sunset, 70 degrees.
I think it was Al Ilg who said that the thing that stuck out to him, you know, as town manager and heading up the cleanup, was it was so warm out in those days following, and there were bees, I guess, around. There were a lot of bees around, and it was a problem because these workers that were cleaning up were getting stung. And, you know, everything was just off kilter anyway, with the tornado had tossed up everything. So,
that month was interesting because now you say that. The week prior, a storm came through, we lost a tree in the front yard. It got blown over. Then we had the tornado, and then you said the warmth and the bees, and then a week later, it snowed.
yep.
It's amazing what you can remember when you're 10.
I know, it's amazing.